Good evening, people of Mount Zion and beyond. Welcome to our weekly Wednesday night Bible study. For the next however long this pandemic period lasts, I'll be picking up these Wednesday night services exactly where we left off before and running through them pretty much exactly the way we ran them before. What we've been doing is tracing through the main themes of the Bible very slowly, a few passages at a time. We've been kind of loosely using the New Hampshire Confession of Faith. That is an old Baptist doctrinal statement from the early 1800s as a general guide, and then looking closely at the passages of Scripture that it cites as a way to really get our heads around how the Bible speaks into our lives. And so, picking it back up where we left off, we are looking at the New Hampshire Confession of Faith. It says, and I quote, "We believe that such only are real believers as endure unto the end, that their persevering attachment to Christ is the grand mark which distinguishes them from superficial professors, that a special providence watches over their welfare, and that they are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation." That's a new section. We finished up the section on sanctification last week and have moved on to a new section called Perseverance of the Saints this week. As always, this is written in kind of old-timey language, but we're going to be hearing this over and over and over again for the next several weeks. And one of our hopes is that just over time, the old-timey, kind of difficult, kind of complex language that we hear in the New Hampshire Confession of Faith will get just a little bit easier to understand, that we'll kind of learn it from the inside. Now, one of the passages that the New Hampshire Confession is drawing from here is 1 John chapter 2, verses 18 and 19. That is 1 John chapter 2, verses 18 and 19. We want to look at this passage this evening. John says, "Children, it is the last hour. And as you have heard, Antichrist is coming. Even now, many antichrists have come. We know from this that it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they did not belong to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. However, they went out so that it might be made clear that none of them belonged to us." Let's take this point by point. First, John says, "Children, it is the last hour." Already, that's kind of strange. We're not used to hearing that kind of thing, right? John says, this is the last hour. Your translation might put it just a little bit differently. It might say, these are the last days, or something along those lines. This is one of the differences between the way the Bible talks about the last days and the way that radio preachers and doomsday preppers talk about the last days. There's a difference. If you read a lot of John Hagee or Hal Lindsey or any of the really popular kind of end times fetish people from the 80s or 90s or early 2000s, you probably think of the end times as some far off period where there's a one world government and a cashless society and people are getting microchipped and so on and so forth. These are all really common buzzwords that you hear from preachers who traffic in end times speculation. But one of the things you notice as you read through the Scriptures for yourself is that none of this is in the Bible. There is nothing about a one world government in the Bible. There is nothing about a cashless society in the Bible. There's nothing about microchips or anything like that in the Bible. In fact, the way the Bible talks about the end times is comparatively really boring. Because the way the New Testament puts it, the end times are already here. You want to know what the end times are like? Look around. You're looking at them. They've already started. John says, "Children, it is already the last hour." And so he says, as you have heard, Antichrist is coming. But even now, many antichrists have come. We know from this that it is the last hour. This is another thing that really grates against what a lot of us might have grown up learning, because most of us probably think of the Antichrist as a single figure, one really bad, really powerful dude. If you've seen the Omen movies or you've read Left Behind or something like that, you probably think of the Antichrist as a political figure, maybe an American president, or maybe someone with the UN or the EU. A lot of people believed that Donald Trump was the Antichrist, and a lot of people before him thought that Barack Obama was the Antichrist. Same with Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping. The list goes on. But peel back all the pointless speculation, and what you see is that John's not talking about anything like that at all. He says, even now, many antichrists have already come. There's not one antichrist. There are more antichrists than anybody can count. But the point of this passage is really not to drop bombs on the currently popular form of kind of end times theology. In fact, end times stuff is not the main point of this passage at all. Instead, we want to focus on what John says after all of this. Because take a look at what he goes on to say. He says, they went out from us. That's the antichrists. But they did not belong to us. They went out from us, but they did not belong to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. However, they went out so that it might be made clear that none of them belongs to us. Do you hear that? What makes a person an antichrist? Abandoning the gospel. Rejecting the faith. Becoming an enemy of the kingdom. He's not necessarily saying that everybody who stops being a Christian is an antichrist, but he's saying that you become an antichrist by turning coat, by abandoning the faith once delivered and beginning to oppose God's will and God's purposes. He says they went out from us, but they did not belong to us. For if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. However, they went out so that it might be made clear that none of them belong to us. And this is where it gets interesting. Because he doesn't say that they used to be part of us, but now they're condemned. He doesn't say they were saved, but then they abandoned the faith and now they're damned again. He says they went out from us, but they did not belong to us. He says, if they had belonged to us, then they would have remained with us. He says, they went out so that it might be made clear that none of them belong to us. He's saying if someone abandons the faith, it's because they were never part of the faith. He's saying if someone rejects the gospel permanently, forever, not just a temporary period of rebellion, it's because they were never part of the faith. John says they went out from us, but they did not belong to us. He says if they had belonged to us, they would have remained with us. He says they went out so that it might be made clear that none of them belong to us. This is a doctrine that we call perseverance of the saints. A lot of Baptists in recent decades have used the phrase, once saved, always saved. That's good. That works. That's fine. But John would have phrased it a little bit differently. In our passage this evening, John's saying something more along the lines of, if saved, always saved. In the coming weeks, we'll walk through a little more of the theology of how this works, what this looks like. We'll look at how if saved, always saved, plays out in our lives. But just like last week, this is kind of an elevator pitch as far as this concept goes. With each passing week, we will go over another one of the passages that that helps to illustrate and clarify what salvation looks like for us, so that with each passing week, the biblical picture of salvation will come just a little bit more clearly into view. But until next week, as always, I would like to remind you that even though we've temporarily shifted to a combination of online and drive-in services, the leadership at Mount Zion is still available to help you in any way that we are able. If you're a member of one of the groups that experts say are especially at risk for COVID-19, either because you're over 65 or you are somehow immunocompromised, or you have certain pre-existing conditions that make COVID-19 particularly dangerous for you, reach out to us and let us serve you. We are here for you insofar as we are able to be. And so, as always, until next time, we love you, we miss you, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.